The sun hung low over the desert town of Dry Creek the day Jesse Calder was brought down. His name had carried weight across the frontier for years, part curse, part legend, whispered in saloons and around campfires. Some called him a thief, others a folk hero, but all agreed he was a man who lived by his own rules and carried secrets locked deep in his chest. On that fateful morning, he rode hard across the mesa, a black stallion beneath him, dust curling in his wake. He never reached town. Shots cracked from the rocks above, echoing across the wide plain. Bullets tore into his back as he spurred his horse forward. They said he didn't even draw his gun. By the time he hit the dirt, life had already slipped away. The deputies who brought him down dragged his body into town, claiming the outlaw had finally met his end. The sheriff stood tall on the boardwalk, tipping his hat to the crowd, declaring that justice had been done. No trial, no ceremony. Just a quick burial outside the town limits, in a patch of ground meant for men who had crossed the law. The coffin was plain, the prayers brief. By sundown, the earth had closed over Jesse Calder. The townsfolk returned to their lives, some relieved, some grieving, some whispering that men like Jesse Calder did not die so easily. It began as murmurs in the dark. A ranch hand swore he saw a lone rider on the ridge 2 nights after the burial, the silhouette of a tall man on a coal dark horse against the fading light. Another man, drunk and stumbling home from the saloon, insisted he heard Jesse's whistle, low and steady, drifting down the empty street. At first, these were dismissed as shadows and whiskey-born imaginings. But then hoofprints appeared outside the saloon at dawn, too fresh to ignore. Dogs barked at nothing, horses reared at night, and Clara, the saloon owner who had once loved Jesse Calder, found a black feather on her windowsill, the same calling card Jesse had left behind whenever he visited her in secret. The town's unease grew. Farmers refused to leave their homes after dark. The deputies, once brash and proud of their ambush, now spent their nights drinking heavily, unwilling to ride patrol. The sheriff, who had declared himself the man who ended Jesse Calder's reign, began to sleep with his revolver on his chest, jumping at every knock on the door. He had reason to fear. For Jesse Calder's life had been tangled with his in ways the town did not know. Secrets tied them together, secrets that, if revealed, could destroy everything the sheriff had built. As days bled into nights, the town of Dry Creek seemed to breathe under the weight of something unseen. Stories spread like wildfire. Some swore Jesse had risen from the grave, a restless spirit come to haunt those who betrayed him. Others whispered he had never truly died, that the bullets had failed to finish the job, and that he was out there, waiting for his moment to return. Clara kept a lantern burning in her window each night, a beacon for a man she had buried with her own tears but could not stop waiting for. And then, one evening, the waiting ended. The sun had just slipped beyond the horizon when the people of Dry Creek froze in place. Down the length of Main Street, dust swirled in the twilight as a lone rider appeared. His coat was torn, dark as coal, hanging heavy on his shoulders. His horse was black as night, hooves striking a steady rhythm on the packed earth. The rider's hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but the townsfolk did not need to see his eyes to know who it was. The scar on his hand caught the last light of day, and the whistle on his lips, the same whistle heard in countless nights before, was Jesse Calder's. A hush fell over Dry Creek. Men dropped cards at their tables, women pulled children close, and whispers rose like smoke. Some crossed themselves, believing they were watching a ghost ride past. Others felt cold dread gnaw at their bones, convinced Jesse had clawed his way back from death itself. Whatever the truth, none dared speak his name aloud. They simply watched as he passed, silent and steady. The outlaw they had buried riding again down Main Street. Behind the fear was a deeper truth, one few dared to admit. Jesse Calder had not died that day in the desert. The bullets had left him broken, bleeding, but not lifeless. He had been found by an old hermit who lived in the barren hills, a man forgotten by time. Nursed in shadows, fed by hands that asked for nothing in return, Jesse had clawed his way back from the edge of the grave. His scars would never heal, his strength would never fully return, but his will burned hotter than ever. He rose from the dust not as a man seeking his old life, but as a shadow seeking justice, for Jesse carried more than wounds. He carried knowledge. The ambush had not been fate, it had been arranged. The sheriff had not wanted him alive, for Jesse knew too much. He knew of the sheriff's dealings with the very outlaws he claimed to fight, the secret shipments stolen and resold, the pockets lined with blood money. Jesse had been dangerous not because of his gun, but because of what he knew. Killing him was not justice, it was survival. And survival had failed. The weeks that followed Jesse's return plunged Dry Creek into terror. The deputies who had fired their shots were found one by one, some missing, some dead, others fleeing in the night, swearing they had seen Jesse's black horse behind them on the trail. Clara spoke of a figure standing in the shadows outside her saloon, watching but never entering. The townsfolk began to turn their eyes toward the sheriff, suspicion curling like smoke. If Jesse Calder truly rode again, it was not for vengeance alone, it was for truth. The final reckoning came beneath the moonlight. Main Street filled with silent faces as the sheriff confronted the outlaw who would not die. The lawman stood trembling, revolver in hand, while Jesse sat tall on his horse, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. The town waited, breath held, hearts hammering. No trial, no jury. Just the hiss of the wind through the street, and the knowledge that justice had come due. Shots rang out, echoing off wooden buildings, cutting the night in two. When dawn broke, the sheriff was gone. Some say he lay in the dirt, cut down by the very man he had betrayed. Others swore he fled into the desert, never to return. And Jesse Calder, whether he lived or died in that last exchange, was nowhere to be found. His horse's tracks led west, into the endless stretch of sand and stone, where the sun swallows everything in time, but the story did not end there. Dry Creek still whispers of him, even now. They say on moonless nights, you can hear the whistle drifting down the street, faint but clear. They say a black stallion sometimes grazes at the edge of town, right or unseen. And they swear the outlaw they shot in the back still rides Main Street, not as a man, not as a ghost, but as a legend that death itself could not claim. For betrayal may bury a man's body, but it can never bury his truth. And in Dry Creek, that truth rides forever in the shape of Jesse Calder, the outlaw who refused to stay dead.